My name is Gemma and I'm a senior florist here at Moyses Stevens. Today I wanted to show you how we can use this container right here or something similar if you have it at home to create a really beautiful, pretty and quite simple seasonal spring table arrangement for your home. When it comes to making a table arrangement, you have to consider quite a few elements. The most important one will always be the container. I've got a ceramic pot, it's watertight, it's got quite a big surface area so we can put lots of flowers in, but the downside to this is having to put lots of flowers in. So what we wanted to do is create a mechanic that's going to hold the flowers into place and just help to reduce the amount of space that we have to fill in. For my first element, I've chosen some pussy willow. If you have this at home and it doesn't have this lovely flexibility, you can put it in some water and it will just soften it up a little bit. Just gonna place the water into the vase, so however much you need, and of course keep this topped up. So just grabbing a little amount of the stems. I'm gonna remove some of the little furry bit, simply because they're otherwise just gonna sit and float in the water. Pulling them together, and I wanna create like big, bold loops. So manipulating them down, base of the stem in first, and just curling it in. And the first couple of times, I think that was beginner's luck, the first couple of times you do need to be careful because they might pop out. So pulling off the bases, popping them in, and I just want a really random formation. And this is the foundation of our arrangement. It's going to help to keep the flowers in place when we pop them in. It's reducing some of the surface area down, and it just adds a different characteristic to the vase, make it look a little bit more natural, and of course always a bit more fun. And I can move them around if I need to. I'm just going to pop this to the side and grab my tulips. I love that noise, it's all squeaky. These are a double variety, and that basically means that instead of the classic tulip that just has the petal formations at the edge, on these ones, if we just get a closer look, they have all these gorgeous ruffles. To get the best out of my tulips, I'm going to use a technique that's called reflexing. And what we are doing is manipulating the natural petal formation. I'm going to highlight the beauty of the flower by showcasing all the petals. And we're going to use the base of our thumb, the pad of our thumb, to press down into the base of the petals and reflex them back onto themselves. So to do so, we thumb and pulling down. This also works better on slightly older flowers. You need your flowers, if it was super fresh, what would happen is we would start doing this and they would bruise, possibly just pop back straight into place. So we need to use an older flower just to get the best out of them. But you can see already it completely changes the overall look of the flower. And what it does is it makes it look how you would have them in the garden, just as they're coming to the end of the season. And we keep on going until we can actually see the stamen, like so. And what we've done is we've taken a relatively, I don't want to say basic because all flowers are beautiful in their own right, but certainly not the most interesting tulip I've ever seen. And we've really created something quite beautiful from it. But when you see how beautiful they look when they all come together, it really is worth taking that little bit of extra time, and you do end up with something as stunning as this. The next stage, and possibly the most important, would be to condition them. So by conditioning, I mean take away any of the excess leaves that we don't necessarily need. The leaves itself, if we have them sitting in the water, they're going to create bacteria and possibly kill off our flowers a little bit quicker than we would like. Not too much, because I want to use the leaf as a foliage, and also they add in a little bit more stability. They're a little bit brittle, so you do have to be careful when you're cleaning them down that you don't snap them. But tulips themselves, if they're left out of water for a long time, they will start to droop, so we do want to keep them in the water. To condition a tulip, very simple. You can do one of two ways. You can either take the leaf and just pull away. I've also decided to use these pon ranunculus, and this is a variety that's called Aurora. They were actually a mutation of a ranunculus, so the traditional ranunculus that are very peony-like in appearance. They decided to cultivate them, and we have these gorgeous flowers as you find them today. They're great because they have these long, thin stems, so you have a lot of impact at the head. They're nice and clean. You don't have to condition or pull away too much of the foliage itself. And I always feel that they've got a longer lifespan than a traditional ranunculus. With this variety, you can often get as much as 3 weeks out of them if you look after them properly. And I love them because no two stems are ever the same. So you can see here it's almost got 2 middles. This one's a traditional, just big blousy head. The stem itself of the ranunculus can be a little bit hollow. These ones are really lovely and strong, but often they will neck, and that's because where they're hollow and the stem is quite thin, it just can't support the beauty of the head itself, so they do tend to neck. With the pon variety as well, they don't have too many side shoots coming off of them. You don't have to spend too long conditioning them and pulling away all those bits of foliage. And with these, it's really simple conditioning, and it would just be removing the foliage and throwing them away. The foliage of the ranunculus breaks down really, really quickly in water. It will go super slimy, and it will really be quite smelly. With all our elements cleaned and prepared, we can now begin. If you're replicating something like this at home, it's basically your imagination and the container that's going to limit you to where you can go with it. I've got lots of experience under my belt here, so I like to just relax into it and see where it takes me. I'm going to start with my tulips and keeping the foliage on. I don't want everything to be on surface level, so by that I mean I'm not going to keep the length on every single stem, especially because they're so blousy and they do have that flexibility to the stem. So I do want to utilize this and just let it find its own place. Always really important to cut every single stem before you place it in. And I always say you're better off cutting off little bits at a time rather than taking it right back to where you think you'll need to. Instead of cutting it straight, and if that was sitting on the bottom of the vase, it's like that, it's flush. And the flower itself can't then drink. So by creating this diagonal shape, it means that when the stem is sitting on the base of the vase, it's got a lot of surface area, so it's going to be able to drink up. And I'm using the grid, the cage formation, and this is what's going to hold and secure everything into place. So I'm going to be slotting in amongst these waves of pussy willow and popping it in, using that piece of foliage to help secure it as well. And I do all of one type of flower first, and I do this so I can see the placement properly. Otherwise it all gets a little bit jumbled up, and I want to make sure that every single flower has its place, it has its moment to shine. And that grid, you know, you've got no real wobble, they're not all falling out. Working in like so. It's just having a little bit of confidence in what you're doing. Step back as well, and then you can look on it. Let's see if it's going where you would want it to go. Trimming them down. I'm going to put some in quite tight as well. It just is like peaks and flows that way. It means you've got points of interest and you can really be invited to look at it closer and see all the little points of interest. So I'm going to trim that quite low and pop it all the way in. Do the same with this one. So nice big diagonal cut, using that little bit of foliage there as another little piece of support. Putting it in. Everything at the moment is quite on the periphery, so I'm still going to need to feed into the middle a little bit more. I'm cutting, and before I place it in and pull it out and place it in, I'm holding it up against the actual vase itself, so I can see that when I put it in, and by doing this it's still going to be a little bit too tall, so take it away again, cutting it down. When you're creating something, you do get really immersed. I've built up these layers and I've really just set the groundwork, got the bones of the structure in, and it means now that I can use my blousy ranunculus to fill in. With the ranunculus, because they don't have that bulk of foliage, they're going to slot into the arrangement really easily. And I'm going to utilize the playful nature of some of the stems. So we do have some that are super straight, and these ones that have a little bit of a bend to them, and I am going to be utilizing that. With a hollower stem, just be a little bit more gentle on the cut, because you might damage if you put too much pressure on, but it is pretty much the same principle, just that nice sharp diagonal cut before we place them all in individually. And these ones really do slide in a lot easier because we don't have a bulk of foliage and the stems are slim and not too chunky. Feeding them in. That one, so I'm going to keep him on. Let's just feed. And this one, can you see, it's got a little bit of a curve. So just to echo this tulip here and get a little bit more interest at this point, I'm going to pop right there. And I love that contrast then between those two flowers together. I'm popping some more down towards the edge just to create a little bit more interest. I'm putting these in quite low because I think it's important to think about all the different angles something is going to be viewed from. I love using these ones taller because you can appreciate the little buds, and these are quite a solid flower. The stem is quite, it doesn't really have a lot of movement in it, but the buds, you know, they're really playful and they've got a lot of movement. So I do like to utilize that on there. I'm going to follow the line of that ranunculus and just bring it out a little bit taller. I noticed that this bit here isn't very, it is interesting, it is pretty to look at, but I would prefer another little stem to go right here. Another one here as well. And finishing off with my last little playful one. I think that's my arrangement done. I hope you've enjoyed learning some of these techniques that we use. This can obviously be adapted in so many different ways. You don't have to use the same flowers that I've used today, but I hope it leaves you feeling inspired enough to at least try them at home, and it would be great to know how you get on. If you have any flowery questions, anything that you would like to see us make, or flowers that you would like to see us use in the future, we'd really like to know, so please do leave us a comment. In our description, we've shared a little bit more details about our flower school. We're based in London. If you wanted to come and visit us, or even give us a call to chat over all our different courses before you decide to come and see us, we'd really like to hear from you.